Okay. So last time we were learning about Samach, and Samach, we explained, stands for Simanim. And Simanim is signs meaning ways of studying or ways of learning. And what we found interesting was it's not just exams. Our kids are doing exams now, right? So the children memorize the information by various signs and techniques of memory. Actually, Torah indicated to that a while back. So we spent quite a bit of time last time learning about gematrias, which is the numerical values of various words. And we also spoke about atbash, if you remember, atbash, the first letter and the last letter, first letter and the last letter of the alphabet, or bet is the second letter and shid is the second last letter. So we spoke about, hi Robin, good morning. We spoke about how atbash, how the letters can be read in close context with each other. Today I want to do something slightly different. In fact, on the same theme, but slightly different, and that is to focus on 2 or 3 more different types of simanim, of signs, which the chachamim, the rabbis, have given us over the years, which has given us the skills, so to speak, to interpret or extrapolate Torah law. Okay, so the first one is, what I want to speak about is Rashi Tevot. And Rashi Tevot is an acronym. That's the English letter, an acronym. Rashi Tevot means the head of all the letters, or the last of all the letters. There's different ways of doing it. You can either take all the first letters, or you can take all the last letters, and those letters form a particular word, which we can learn from. So I'll share with you one or two that are, I think, of interest. There's a halacha that says, that a person should only say goodbye to their friend with the word of halacha, with the word of Torah law. So when you say goodbye, it should come with a halacha. First of all, in general, it's a word of Torah, right? And second of all, more specifically, a word of halacha. Why is that so important? Because what connects the Jewish people around the world internationally is Torah. What makes us connected to a French Jew or to a Russian Jew? It's our Judaism, it's our Torah. So when we say goodbye to somebody and we share with them a Dvar Torah, that word of Torah actually connects us. So that even when you're overseas and you've traveled away from me, I still remain connected to you through that particular Torah teaching. More specifically, it's halacha specifically. Why halacha? Because halacha comes from the word lalechet, to move, to go. Jewish law is that laws that instruct us or guide us how to behave, how to conduct ourselves, how we should go in life, how we should practice in life. So before saying goodbye to somebody who's actually about to leave, we share with them a dvar halacha, a word of halacha. As they depart, they should carry these words away with them. So the Vilna Gaon actually gave the following insight. He said, if you were to summarize one halacha, I'll pull up my board here, my whiteboard. If you were to summarize one halacha in the shortest phrase, okay, the shortest phrase, what would the halacha be? And he said that the shortest halacha in Hebrew that you can find is the following halacha. He said like this: Yachid. Excuse the time here. I want to write it out for you. Virabim. It's a bit. Okay, Yachid virabim. Halacha. Kirabim. Avram Fried actually has a song on these words. Okay, so this is a resh. So halacha, he said that the shortest halacha is Yachid v'rabim halacha k'rabim. What does that mean? Yachid is an individual. Rabim is plural. When you have one person voting against plural, against many people, the halacha goes like k'rabim, like the many. Right? That's the rule of majority. So what did he say? He said this is the shortest halacha, and you can see an interesting thing. Look at the Rashi Tevot, the beginning of the letters. So if we highlight the beginning of the letters, Yud, Vav, Hey, and Chaf, spells Yuhach, right? Yuhach. Says the Vilna Gaon, what's unique to this? The Malach, the angel that protects people on their way as they travel, is actually called Yuhach. Now, I had never heard that before, but the Vilna Gaon writes that's the name of the Malach. The name of the Malach is Yuhach, that protects us while we're traveling. This is why we say Tfilat Haderech, also the prayer for the traveler as we're driving out of town or as we're flying. Is a special prayer, which we say Tfilat Haderech. It's worthwhile. If you're not accustomed to it, I would encourage you. It does give you a sense of security as you're traveling, as you're driving. It's in all the Sidurim, called the prayer for the traveler. But beside that, Yuhach is the angel. So what do we see here? That the shortest halacha actually alludes and hints to travel. Yachid v'rabim halacha k'rabim. That's the first Rashi Tevot I wanted to point out. The second Rashi Tevot, if anything's unclear, please stop me and ask. Feel free. The second halach, that's the first one. Yuhach. That's Yuhach. Yuhach. Okay, that's how you spell the Yuhach, which is the angel of protection as we travel. The second one that we're all familiar with. Let's clear this. The second one that we're all familiar with is from the Haggadah. I touched upon it last week. The 10 plagues, right? So we have the Tzach, Adash. We say this in the Seder night. The Achav. Right. So here we were given a Rashi Tevot to help us remember. And what's interesting is on the Haggadah, on the Seder night, we actually tip out wine, not just when saying Dam Tzvardea, Kinim, Arov, Deveshchin, Barad, Abe, Choshech, and Makat Bechorot, which are the 10 plagues, but even when we say these acronyms, we also do it. Which is interesting that this acronym actually carries such weight. I saw an interesting commentary that wrote from the Medrash on Shiur HaShirim, that these acronyms were actually engraved on Moshe Rabbeinu's staff. I never knew that these acronyms, right? So it's not just an acronym. It's not just an acronym that Rabbi Yehuda in the Haggadah made up and gave us a tool with which to remember the 10 plagues. These 10 letters of the acronym of the 10 plagues were actually engraved on Moshe's staff, which is very interesting because Hashem did say to Moshe when it came to the plagues, take your staff, right? Moshe's staff is a very, very integral part of the plagues on the Egyptians. So that's the acronym. One of the things we learn from this acronym, and the fact that this acronym is so important, and in general, what we learn from acronyms and Rashi Tevot in general, is that the rabbis teach us a law that says, always teach your student b'derech tzara. When you're teaching a student, and it can even be a child, when you're teaching someone, teach them b'derech tzara. What does that mean? Teach them in a short manner, in a short way, right? Rather than long and in-depth and philosophical. Why? Because the shorter we teach them, the higher of the chance that they're actually going to remember what they're being taught. And so that's a tool for everything, that when you want to teach a complicated concept or a new concept, try and find the shortest way of teaching it. And it's one of the things we learn from these acronyms, is to teach things quickly and shortly, so that the student actually can memorize and remember that which they're being taught. It's a skill in education, not just for teachers, for parents too. It's a skill in education to be able to transmit information in the easiest way possible. And that's one of the ways of doing it, is by use of the acronym, by use of the Rashi Tevot. There's also another reason why with these three, they were divided into three categories. Is because each one was done in a different strategy, a different way. So, for example, the first list of plagues, dam tzvadei kinim, blood, frogs, and lice, is that Aaron HaKohen, Aaron was responsible for these three, not Moshe Rabbeinu. Why? Because each one of those had to do with either the earth or the water, and Moshe owed a sense of gratitude to the earth or to the water, because he obviously was put into the Nile, so the water protected him, or he buried the Egyptian man that he had killed. He buried the Egyptian man in Egypt under the soil in the earth. So for that reason, he could not be the one responsible for blood, frogs, or lice. And that's why that was done by Aaron. The second three, the wild animals, or the sickness among the animals dying, or the boils, were done by Moshe, not using his staff, right? He wasn't instructed to use his staff for these three. I'm not sure exactly why that was. I don't recall offhand why it was not with the staff. And the last four, hail, pestilence, grasshoppers, choshech, darkness, and the plague of the firstborn, were done with Moshe holding his staff. So that's just an easy way of remembering, is that the Chachamim, the rabbis, who divided up the acronym into three different parts. It's one way of remembering that these three were done actually separately in different methods. They were brought upon the Egyptians. So that's the idea of Rashi Tevot, finding ways of remembering information. But this is more than that. These three were actually engraved on Moshe's staff, which is quite unique.
Rabbi, can I just ask you to write Tibut?
Sorry? To write which one?
The Rashi Tibut.
Yeah. To write that.
Yeah.
Yeah, look here.
I was hearing Tovot, which is equally good.
Yeah, Tovot is also very good. It's not the context here. It's actually a tough. Yeah, Tevot is right. Here we go. Tevot is with a tough, which just as an extra while we're busy with this, Tevot means letters. Tevot also comes from the word Teva. Teva is the I'll do in brackets. What happened here? Teva is the ark of Noach. Was called a Teva, and the commentaries explain what's the connection. The connection is that if you want to stay safe from the mabul, from the floods outside, get involved in the letters and the words of Torah, and that they will keep you safe. That's the connection to Teva. Okay, Rashi Tevot. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, good. Now, sorry. Second. Yeah, okay. Fine. That's in general. Any questions on Rashi Tevot? Let me know. Otherwise, we're going to go on to another interesting Rashi Tevot, which actually links to this topic a lot, and that is the 4 different levels of studying Judaism and Torah teachings. So there's 4 different levels, 4 different I would call it like a peel of an orange. Imagine that there was a peel, 4 different peels within an orange. Okay, and each time you peel away, you're getting deeper and deeper into the essence of the topic. Okay, so the 4 different levels that have been shared with us are the following. We have pshat, and pshat means the simple meaning. We have remez, which is the hinting, which is part of our discussion now of gematria and numerical values and acronyms, is a remez, it's a hint. Then we have drush, and drush is like a drasha, which is the application of the Torah's teachings into action, into how I should behave myself, my conduct, my behavior, my attributes. That's drush. And then we have sod, and sod is the hidden teachings, more the Kabbalistic teachings that focus on souls and neshamot and reincarnation and creation. That's obviously all part of the teachings of sod, of the secrets of Torah. Now, if we were to take the 4 first letters of those 4 types of study, it spells this. I'm not going to write out each of the 4 words, but I will write out the 4 letters. So we have pshat, okay, that's the simple meaning. Then we have remez, which is the resh, remez, hinting. Then we have drush, which is the application of Torah's learning into action, into behavior. And then we have sod, which is the secrets of Torah, the Kabbalistic teachings of Torah. Okay, those are 4 sections that we have of Torah. They're actually an acronym. Whenever it's an acronym, we put the acronym right like that. But this word itself actually spells a word in its own. The word parades. Anyone know what parades means?
Paradise.
A field.
Right.
The field.
Yeah. Exactly, Lisa. Right. It's not paradise. It's a paradise is a field or an orchard. Exactly. Thanks for that. So what's the connection? As we walk into Torah's teachings, it's as if we're walking into a field. Meaning, what happens when you walk into a field or into an orchard? You are blocked out from the whole world around you. Nothing else features, right? All you see is trees hovering over, trees and fruit. That's all you see. You don't see anything else that's around. That's what Torah is like. When we get involved in Torah's teachings, it's like an island away from chaos, right? Somehow, if we're able to pull ourselves away, which thank you all for being online this morning and trying to pull away from the chaos of the world around us. When we get involved in the Torah's teachings, it's like walking into a paradise. It's like walking into a field or an orchard of Torah's teachings. There's actually a story told, I don't remember offhand the details, but the Gemara, you may have heard this before. There are 4 sages that walked into the paradise of Torah. They walked into the orchard of Torah more than just the first lower levels, right? The first basic levels. They went into the esoteric teachings of Torah. And the way the Gemara describes it, the Talmud describes it, is they walked into the field, the orchard of Torah, but they were exposing themselves to the inner teachings, the inner insights of Torah's teachings. And in fact, it had an effect on some of them. The rabbis actually teach that one walked out normal, one actually went crazy as a result of that experience. One died as a result of that experience. And it says one of them nichnas b'shalom v'yasa b'shalom. He went in with peace and he walked out with peace. So why am I bringing that example is because that experience of Torah's teachings, I'm not just saying the esoteric teachings. In general, walking into the discussion of Torah is like walking into an orchard blocked out from the rest of the world. What we need to do really is to take from the fruits of the orchard and to be able to move back in to the world around us, hopefully more inspired or more focused as a result of that experience. So this is another acronym, a third that we've spoken about. We spoke about the halacha of Yachid v'Rabim, halacha k'Rabim, right? The short halacha that spells out, the acronym spells out Yuhach, which is the angel that protects the person as they travel. We spoke about the Tzach Adash Be'achav, which is the acronym of the plagues in Mitzrayim, which was engraved on Moshe's staff. And we spoke about Parades being the orchard of Torah with the 4 different levels of Torah's teachings.
I've taken Jacob to test him. I know.
Okay, so that's the 3 different levels. Let's go on. Okay, is that clear? Good. Then there's another way of learning. I spoke about remez, right? So remez was the second way of learning. Pshat is the narrative, right? It's a simple storyline. Remez is the hidden way of learning. So there's a beautiful remez or hint and we touched upon this style of learning in our previous discussion last week when we spoke about gematrias and numerical values. But there's a beautiful insight when it comes to the hitting of the rock in last week's Torah portion by Moshe Rabbeinu, where he hit the rock, and as a result of hitting the rock and not speaking to the rock, he was punished and not allowed to go into Israel. So let me show you what I mean by remez. This is like another way of learning. I want to show you this. So remember we said last time we learned that there's one way of writing a letter, but there's another way of writing it out in full. So Moshe Rabbeinu hit the rock. What's the Hebrew word for a rock that the Torah uses? Anyone know? I'll give you a hint. Samach. Okay, so the Hebrew word for a rock is sela. Normally we would say even in Hebrew, but the word sela is also used in modern Hebrew, is the Hebrew word for a rock. So the way we spell sela is like this: Samech lamed ayin. Okay, sela. Now, how do we spell samech in full? If you remember, we did this exercise last time we learned. How do you spell samech in full? Samech in full is mem chaf. That spells samech in full. How do you spell lamed in full? Lamed mem daled. Spells lamed in full. How do you spell ayin in full? Ayin yud nun. Okay, so now here comes the remez, the hints. What did Moshe Rabbeinu do? Moshe Rabbeinu hit the rock, not just once, hit the rock twice. Okay, so the rabbis teach the following. The first time he hit the rock, he knocked off these letters off the rock. He took off the external letters. The second time he hit the rock, he took off the other external letters of the rock and looked at the letters that were left in the middle. If you mix up those letters, what do we get? The middle letters. Mix up the middle letters, what do they spell?
Mayim.
Very good. Mayim. Excellent. So the rabbis say that that's what the hitting of Moshe did. Moshe Rabbeinu hit the rock. The rock had potential in it. The rock had the mayim in it. He wasn't supposed to hit it. He was supposed to speak to it. But when he did hit it, it extracted water. Because spiritually, what Moshe did was that he knocked off the letters of each one. Now, you may say, oh, that sounds crazy. But at the same time, the name of something is its essence. Our name is our essence. The name Sela is the essence of that rock. And inside Sela, there's mayim. How do you get to the mayim? You've got to somehow extract that water. So spiritually, what you do is either you speak to it, which maybe by speaking, you would have brought out the essence. I'll touch upon that in a second. If by speaking, you would have brought out the essence, but also by hitting, spiritually knocking off the external letters from each side, you spell mayim. Just to mention that point, when we work with a child, there's two ways of extracting the inside of the child, the essence. Either we speak to the child, and by speaking to the child, we slowly but surely get rid of the outside, like we would do with an adult. We try and get rid of the anger or the frustration or the confusion on the outside. And we try and reveal their essence, their neshama. We do that by speaking and by discussing. The other way of extracting the essence, is by discipline. And by discipline, you often are able to bring out the core as well. So here is what Moshe Rabbeinu did. And by doing that, he extracted the mayim in between. That's a remez. There's no acronym here, and there's no Rashi Tevot, right? Head of letters. It's just a hint. Another hint, which is very interesting, is regarding the forefathers. Again, in the category of remez. In the category of the forefathers, so we have Avraham. Excuse my writing here. We have Avraham. Yitzchak. Now again, this is a little bit, on all these different ones, you can ask questions as to whether that was really the intention or not. But if it's brought down by the commentaries, it's definitely worthwhile discussing. Whether it talks to you personally or not, each person is an individual. All right, look here. So Avraham, we know that Avraham instituted the first tefillah of the day. Avraham instituted Shachrit, right? Avraham instituted Shachrit, and Yitzchak is Mincha, and Yaakov is Mariv. But Abraham's tefillah is Shachrit. When do we daven? Shachrit? We daven Shachrit in the boker, in the morning. Bet, we daven in the morning. When do we daven Mincha? At Tzoharayim, in the afternoon. Tzoharayim, Yitzchak. And when do we daven Mariv? Erev, in the evening. Ayin, Erev. So by looking at the second letters, and don't ask me why it's the second letters and not the first letter, because I don't know the answer. By looking at the second letters, we actually have a hint to which tefillah they instituted. Boker, Tzoharayim, and Erev, by the morning, by the evening, by the afternoon, and by the evening. On that note, it's brought down, and I don't know if you know this, but it's brought down. You may or you may not. So it's worthwhile mentioning. In the Amidah, when we daven Shmona Esrei, as we get to the end, there's a custom of right at the end, before we say Yihu l'ratzon imrei fi v'heyon libi lefanecha Hashem tzuri v'goali, and then we say Oseh Shalom b'imramav. So right before Yihu l'ratzon imrei fi, there's a custom of saying a verse, a pasuk that's unique to me personally. So what's this pasuk that's unique to me? So there's actually, this is brought down in the holy books, that there's actually a pasuk pretty much to every Hebrew name that has the same opening letter as my name and has the same closing letter as my name. So for example, my name Yehuda, there's a pasuk that starts with a Yud and a pasuk that ends with a Hey, right? That pasuk is unique to me. It's a pasuk that speaks to my neshama, to my name, and to me. And it's brought down that as we finish Shmona Esrei, before we say the words Yihu l'ratzon imrei fi, before we do that, we say our own psukim. I actually have two names, Pinchas Yehuda, so I say two psukim. One that corresponds to the name Pinchas, and one that corresponds to the name Yehuda, and that's my pasuk. What is that all about? That is a remez, that is a hint. The hint is that the pasuk is hinting to my name. By carrying the first letter of my name and the last letter of my name, that pasuk hints to me, to my neshama. It's actually brought down. Rashi is quoted on Micha, on Sefer Micha in Tanakh. Rashi says that one who does this merits that Torah will intercede on their behalf and spare them from judgment up on high. Why? Because if we're standing in front of God, it's a time of judgment, and by quoting a pasuk, the verse that corresponds to my name, that pasuk, so to speak, intercedes on my behalf and protects me. Where else? It says here, according to the Shalah, this custom assures that one's name will be remembered at the future day of judgment. During his stay on earth, every person is a subject of a struggle between the forces of holiness and evil. By attaching one's name to the Holy Script, through reciting this personal verse, a Jew helps rescue his name from the clutches of the other side. So I don't know if you've ever heard that before. I don't know. I think it is. I think if you look in the art scroll, I think in the back sections of the art scroll, it brings the list of psukim, of verses corresponding to various names. What I'll do is after we're done, I'll send a picture of the page, but you can look in your art scroll siddur to see what psukim there are and your letters. And if you would like some help in finding the appropriate verse for your Hebrew name, I'd only be too happy. So you can message me personally and I'll be happy to guide you on that. That's also part of our discussion on remez.
Sorry, Rabbi, so if you've got two names, is it the first name and middle name, or is it just your first name?
No, so you would do both. So I've got two names and I find the verse for each one of my names. And I'll say that. And the way you do it, the way you remember it is by, if you're keen to read up more about this, you would write it out for yourself and keep it in your siddur, so to speak. I mean, it's hard.
Okay, brilliant.
Okay, so I'll find the page. I'm almost certain it's in the art scroll. If it's not there, I've got other siddurim that do have it, and one can learn more about that. But that's connected to remez, right? It's the hints. So by these verses, hinting to my particular name. One last remez for today, and that is related to the topic of sukkah. So this also, I'm sure you're familiar with this, but it just ties into the theme. And that is sukkah. Okay, so the rabbis have taught us that in this word sukkah, we know the halacha of what makes a kosher sukkah. So what makes a kosher sukkah? Either we're going to have a sukkah of 4 walls, because like the samach, even though the samach is slightly round, but in generally it shows four sides. So either we're going to have a sukkah of 4 walls, or we're going to have a sukkah of 3 walls, right, like the chaf, or we're going to have a sukkah of 2 and a bit walls, is also okay. So the letter sukkah actually hints to the way that one could design the sukkah in the most kosher way. Okay, like that. That's how you remember what is considered a kosher sukkah. Just as a conclusion to this topic, as a conclusion, we mentioned that samach is simanim, right? Samach is simanim. That's the simanim we've been speaking about, right? We're speaking about gematrias and atbash, the first and last letters, or acronyms, rashi tevot, or rumazim, or hints. So there's a verse, there's a phrase in the Talmud which will lead us into the next letter. And the phrase in the Talmud says the following: Simanim asay. Make for yourselves simanim, signs. Asay starts with the letter ayin. So it's interesting how samach and ayin go in close proximity to each other. Samach is simanim, ayin is asay. Simanim asay. Make for yourself simanim batorah, in Torah learning, u'kinei ota, and acquire the Torah. That's the instruction that the rabbis give us. Make for yourself simanim and acquire the Torah. Why? Because when we make for ourselves these signs enable us to remember things a lot better. And that's why they gave us these systems. And as I mentioned before, is that these systems of memory are not just modern day systems that the modern day teachers or educational systems have taught us. These systems were actually put in place many years ago by the teachers of Talmud, or even earlier than that. As I mentioned, if Moshe Rabbeinu's staff had on it the acronyms of the 10 plagues, as was brought down in the Medrash, then it shows you that these systems of memory were actually in place from those days already, from before the Torah was given. We've already had these systems in place. Any other questions?
Rabbi?
Yes, Ronit.
I just wanted to ask you, did Hashem give us the Aleph-Bet with it when he gave us the 10 Commandments, or did the rabbis come up with the Aleph-Bet? How did he?
No.
Where did the letters come from?
So the letters are part of oral tradition, but there's two types of oral tradition. It's oral tradition, but it's called Halacha LeMoshe Misinai. So it's definitely given to Moshe on Mount Sinai. He was taught the letters of Aleph-Bet, and that's how he knew how to write the Torah. He wrote for himself the same Torah that we have. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote that Torah for each tribe following during the journey into the desert, and he gave it to them before he passed on. So letters are definitely given to Moshe. It's still called oral tradition, but it's not. I don't want to belittle the oral tradition of the rabbis. I'm just saying that oral tradition for Moshe is considered equally as biblical as the written text would be. That's where the letters come from. And in fact, that's where the tunes for laning come from there as well. Even though you do have slight variations of laning today, Sephardim and Ashkenazim and other people lane it slightly different, but the principles are the same. And those tunes were also taught to Moshe on Har Sinai as well. So the same source. Any other questions on this topic of the Simanim? Otherwise, feel free. The mic is open. Otherwise, please God, next time round, in 2 weeks' time, we're going to go on to the next letter Ayin.
I found these Simanim so fascinating. It's been amazing. Thank you.
So I know, I know you've mentioned before that you would have liked to learn more about this, as we've discussed various gematrias. So I thought it was a good opportunity. Once we're discussing the Samach, we can go and elaborate a little bit on this, which I think has been good.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. It was
Thanks,
brilliant.
Rabbi. Have a good day.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Great.
Have a great week, people.
Bye.
Take care. Take care. Have a good day. Wonderful day ahead. A wonderful week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Catch up later.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.